Hi friends, back here today with an interesting ICO review, X8. Now with Tether being the most obvious comparison, expectations of course go up, and hence it will be interesting to see how this one fares. Let's proceed. Now before we get into the ICO details, we need to have a look at the X8 project to understand why the token on offer does or does not make business sense. So here we go then. The concept is the basic concept behind the X8 project, which is the need for a stable cryptocurrency. Essentially one which apart from doing the basic job of facilitating transactions at a quick pace, can also act as a safe store of value by combating volatility and inflation. We have a new contender, X8 currency, which will be backed by both fiat reserves as well as gold reserves. Now, does this provide the solution to the problem? We'll have to wait and watch. Let's have a look at the cycle of X8 acquisition to get a more detailed understanding of how this works at the back end. We have the user who is intending to procure X8 currency and can pay in fiat currency. It can be some cryptos as well for that matter. And the X8 project mints an equivalent value of X8 currency to hand over to the user for usage. The value derivation I assume is based on ARMAI here. The X8 project on its part converts the received fiat currency into its basket of fiat currencies and gold reserves of course, where the ratio of these 9 elements is controlled by the automatic reserve management AI program which has been written by them. Now, ARMAI aims to run the distribution to minimize volatility and beat inflation by 3 to 4% as per the white paper. The reserves are further diversified across 8 banks and brokers to minimize risk of losses and further reinsured by Swiss Re for any losses. Now, not too sure why it needs to be distributed across 8 custodians if it's anyway being reinsured, but maybe this is to reduce premiums, not sure. Now, when a user returns the X8 token, the project destroys the token, takes out the equivalent amount, converts it to required currency unit, and returns. Ta-da! So in principle, it's actually a great concept. Now looking at the overall transactional flow as per the flow shown in the white paper, there are a couple of things of note. First, the usage permitted is for all major fiats plus Bitcoin or Ether. And of course, the second, as a result of this, is that overall transaction will involve crypto exchanges or dealers as well as banks and gold reserves. Now talking about the X8 currency token, the key points. It's an ERC20 token on the Ethereum blockchain. Each new token issued by the issuer is minted especially for a user making purchase. They, since they're minting coins as per requirements, there's no limit on the number of coins except for the technical limit of 2 raised to power 256, which is set by Ethereum. Each token is fully backed by fiat currency as well as gold reserve, which is distributed across the 9, which is managed by the ARMAI, which obviously now becomes a key element in the whole show. When a user exits, he selects the currency he wants. It can be any major fiat currency supported by X8, or it can be Bitcoin or Ether. All X8C tokens exiting the flow, that is returns from the users, they are destroyed. Now there are some open questions of course. Where will the transaction cost in conversion across fiat or cryptos covered and who will bear them? There seem to be a fair bit of transactions for every issue and return. How will intake and disbursement of fiat currency happen, either when tokens are issued or when tokens are returned? Will there be bank transfers? What will be the time taken for that? How will they overcome forex regulations of individual countries? What will be the overall cost of money movement? If the project is mass accepted, such transactions will actually zoom up. Then, will ARM AI work as required? And of course, what is the base value of X8 currency? Is it €1 distributed across? I've actually assumed it to be €1 based on the illustration they are given later, but still, there's no clear answer. Let's also have a look at the use cases proposed by the project for X8 currency. ICO investments. Now, there's a very clear cut use case as volatility can be detrimental for ICO promoters, especially where they are looking at genuine business models and cash flow estimations are most critical for them. Third party contributors to ICOs or token generation events, again related to ICO funding, though this time for investors. Now, they need to be sure how many tokens they'll receive back while paying in the cryptocurrency. This use case is slightly tricky because most people getting into ICOs are looking at multi-x returns, and barring days of huge volatility, the number of tokens provided won't actually vary much unless we are looking at ICOs where your money is stuck and you're taking a long time to get it released. Normally, these are for overhyped ones. In a nutshell, it might simply turn out to be an average use case. Store of value, saving with low risk of volatility and inflation impact. Now, this one is highly dependent on ARMAI and it also needs a huge leap of faith by investors. Not likely to happen in the short term for the simple reason that cryptos are still looked upon as risky propositions. If I want to store my money in a safe place, I'm okay with the good old US dollar, and if I'm looking for securities, I'll probably go with government bonds. Inflation protection doesn't promise huge returns and won't help here unless XHC is looked upon as a risk free asset itself. Crypto investors, or should I say speculators. The use case is clear cut again, especially for currency pairs for crypto investors, similar to USDT. Of course, we are assuming that exchanges buy into this concept and they should, in all probability, do that. Usage by FIs, financial institutions. I don't find this one quite promising as this will be extremely regulatory dependent. Now, merchants accepting crypto payments. This is another most clear cut case of all, especially with inter country hassle free transactions, which can help almost everyone. Now, to encourage real life transactions, I need to assure the merchants that the tender is stable, quick, and secure. And if this fructifies, this alone will be good enough to carry this through for mass acceptance. Okay, now we had a basic understanding of X8 currency, but the token generation event, of course, is not for X8 currency. It is for X8 utility token, which is X8X. So, what exactly is that? It is a token which gives you access to purchase X8 currency free of cost from the issuer. The total allocation to purchase X8C is in proportion to the square of X8X held. So if you hold 10 X8X tokens, you can purchase up to €100 worth of X8C tokens. Now there is some lack of clarity here as they mention repeated utilization. I do assume that means utilization up to square of the numbers of X8C used. The total X8X supply is limited to 100 million tokens, out of which 34 million will be part of the token generation event. The rest is distributed across other participants as shown in the graph. Of the usage of the proceeds, Swiss architecture takes the lion's share of the funds, which will finance 3-year runway and activity plan and include setup, architecture, licenses, regulatory, and running expenses. IT hardware and production overheads will take the next spot to keep the systems running 24/7, including costs to run redundant hardware in certified locations, security services required to sustain production with a capacity to last up to 10 years in ops, and redundant setups. R&D is next on the list, pretty important to maintain edge in portfolio risk management. Marketing, of course, required to make sure all this works, including token usage and airdrops. And finally, we have bits of legal and overhead expenditures. So overall, nothing out of the ordinary here. It's probably something which matches the project. On the way of procuring X8 utility token, there are of course two ways. Entry price during the token generation event, and of course once it's there in the exchanges, one can enter through the exchange as per the market price, of course. Now coming to the use cases for X8 utility token as per their white paper. The token generation events, as with the X8 currency, the usage of the tokens here makes pretty much sense. The promoters will probably be happy to pay a minor charge to combat volatility. Of course, it depends on their fair valuation of the particular token. Private investors for fast crypto fiat transitioning. Now, there's something which I don't find as a very probable use case. The reason being the major cryptos are liquid and can be exited quickly, while a stable X8 currency doesn't warrant a hurried exit in any case. It does make sense from a general investment for private investors. From their perspective, they would have a stable coin which can be used in place of fiat currency to trade, which essentially becomes a competitor to Tether with additional safety built in. FIs. The use case makes sense if FIs are holding X8 currency, which in itself becomes a usage issue subject to regulations, and I don't find this as a very great case. Large distributors, again, the use case given in the white paper, where a large distributor buys around 100,000 X8 utility tokens and sells part of it to smaller buyers, actually seems the reverse of what he should be doing. consolidation will make sense for him to be able to get more X8 currency and probably sell them at a service charge. So this does make sense from a large distributor perspective, but in a reverse way. Speculators and traders, wow. By usage, I find it different from one of the moving crypto funds to safe haven. For me, traders tend to earn by selling the tokens at a price the buyers are willing to pay. Essentially, speculation like any other token. Now, let's have a look at what they're competing against. They've given a comparison of stable across stable tenders. Now, good old USD is a different ball game altogether, while Zorum is currently doing fairly low volumes. Though I disagree that preservation of value is medium range for Zorum. In fact, its node destruction mechanism is likely to provide a much better rise if it works. But this particular review is not about Zorum. So let's look at the competition here. In most of the use cases we saw earlier, the question is why not simply use Tether? And probably the distinguished features we have, security is much more transparent. We all know the rumors on Tether, and this can actually make good use of the news. No one actually wants to get stuck with a non-backed up coin. And then it seems to be a better combatant to inflation if and only if you trust the ARMAI. Now coming to ARMAI, this is the tough one. They have a chart showing ARMAI performance on portfolio for long term, working with a verification from a trading partner, which for some reason is based out of New Zealand. I'm probably not qualified to understand how the verification works and what the text here actually means, but it doesn't seem to verify that the inflation adjusted figures are correct. It simply states that they have been trading using the algorithm system connected through their APIs. You can draw your own conclusions. I'm slightly skeptical because of this cryptic verification. It should and could have been straightforward, but still I'll probably give it a benefit of doubt here. So coming to the overall business model, again referring to their white paper, the X8X utility token is a KYC token and is an entry ticket to either buy or sell at zero fee the X8C currency from or to the issuer. Effectively, you can bypass the exchange altogether and save both fee and probably time. Now, the use of this ticket more than once is allowed without expiry. Since I didn't find any clarity on a couple of things about X8C pegging, I am assuming, and based on the example they have provided, this means usage up to the token limit. That is currency equivalent of the square of the number of X8X utility tokens held in euros. An assumption of repeat usage beyond limit makes no sense because in that case, I can use the same token for repeated transactions of infinite value. Now, looking at the roadmap, there's been a fair bit of work done till now. In fact, if I recall correctly, they had to cancel their ICO earlier for some reasons. Now, going into future, X8C reserves start in Q1 2018 with Ether to USD conversion available through Bitstamp. In Q1 2018 itself, potential X8X trading will start with exchange listing. Up to 2 million USD reserves are expected by Q3 2018. Starting with USD reserves only right now as distribution at lower reserves makes no commercial sense because of the overheads involved. Within Q3 2018, reserves cost 20 million USD, initiating multi-fiat distribution. Uh, by Q4 2018, gold activation kicks in. And by Q1 2019, the final step is done by initiating multi-broker reserves. Finally, Q4 2019, mass market adoption is initiated. So, what is likely to drive the value for X8X? As we can clearly see, usage of X8 currency will drive the usage of X8X. Now, incentive for consolidation drives further secondary demand. The key players can be TG promoters who will like to pick the tokens to convert X8C to fiat, crypto dealers who will be acting as mediators to convert fiat to X8C and hence pick up chunks of X8C to sell on commission, and of course, exchanges who like to promote this to drive usage and probably use this as an alternate to fiat pairings. Rise in exchange trading costs will further fuel X8X prices further. Fair value might be reached as cost of buying X8C from exchanges less cost associated to anonymity. A user might probably buy straight from exchange instead of getting into the KYC tangle with the issuer and probably pay some extra fees for it. A fall in exchange trading cost will lead to X8X price drop. With more exchanges coming up, competition might create lower trading cost, leading to drop in XATX valuations. Fair price. Now coming to the section which is probably of most interest for investors. How does it price post listing? With a slightly roundabout way of X8C and X8X linkage, it's not that easy to consider all scenarios. They have attached a scenario, but I don't actually agree with it, as I think even 1% cost might not work very nicely, especially in other cases where buying it from exchanges will probably incur a cost ranging from maybe 0.05% to 0.25%. Effectively, I'll put the cost down to 0.15% from a user perspective. The reason being I might pay an extra maybe 0.05 to 0.1% to the exchange to avoid the hassle of KYC with the X8 project. While from exchanges perspective, I'll probably take it around the same range. Exchanges might charge an additional 0.05% to 0.1% again on the anonymity front from the user. Unless of course X8 ends up becoming the preferred payment system across, especially the merchants, where I can avoid payment charges in retail, let us assume that to be about 0.25% to 0.5%. So let us start the calculations taking 0.15%, 0.25%, and 0.5% as the scenarios, possible scenarios. Now looking at all three scenarios and with an issue price of euro 0.1, the first scenario where primarily exchange trading ploy comes into play, and I'm assuming a rate of 0.1%. Any purchase less than euro 10,000 will be at or below the issue price, hence it becomes a no-go for selling the tokens. Essentially, secondary market starts only at 10,000 euros plus. Consequently, it is likely that only ICOs and exchanges might buy into this facility to probably facilitate liquidity and stability within themselves. A ticket size of maybe 1 to 10 million pounds, hence very looks very much possible, pushing the target price between euro 1 to euro 3, which offers roughly a 10x to 30x multiple. The middle scenario essentially settles at euro 0.11, which doesn't go anywhere as exchange sale will be at a higher price, so no one will sell at this rate. The mass market scenario is most interesting. Assuming average size of a euro 500 for mass transactions, it translates to value of euro 0.11. Again, unlikely to find too many sellers at this point as this is less than trading scenario itself, and hence no one will sell, and probably the only possible way of mass market domination will be to bring dealers into play. Again, depending on the dealer interest and size, single transactions correspondingly can fall easily between 10,000 euros to 1 million euros, probably even more. So, correspondingly, the target price falls between zero point 0.5 euros to up to 5 euros. But this is only going to happen when a mass adoption scenario happens, which is probably a bit too far if you look at their roadmap. So, coming to the final checklist, the concept and business model are good. Team is decent. I think some more experience on fund management and blockchain would definitely have been preferable. I didn't find too much of an experience on fund management except for portfolio risk management by the first founder, and the developers seem to lack blockchain experience, or at least it wasn't showing up in the white paper. I didn't actually check their LinkedIn profiles in detail. Readiness levels, they look good. Risk is medium with some unanswered questions regarding the mechanism on how this will work. I've already raised them during the video earlier. These include the ARM AI dependence, transaction cost and conversion across fiat crypto, cost and time for intake and disbursement of fiat currency, as well as the base value for X8C. It looks more or less genuine with so much focus on safety. Competition is tough, with Ether being well established, though we know there have been concerns around transparency and an actual USD backup there, which gives X8 the required openings. The ROI seems good, with roughly 5x to 10x as an expected scenario. I've only taken the exchange scenario as of now, as the mass adoption is fairly far in the future. Investment, I would definitely put a A minus as investment grade. I would have probably given it an A had it not been for the competition with Ether and the unanswered questions. Overall, will it be the next big thing? Probably not, unless it goes beyond the most optimistic zone and maybe simply land up purely in a speculative mode. If mass market adoption kicks in with dealers getting involved, 30x is definitely attainable, but that's way beyond in Q4 2019. Will it be a good investment? Yeah, it should be. Thank you for your time on this. If you found this useful, please share and like the video. Thank you.